Hello everybody, my name is Raxef, and today we're going to be talking about the interview that Ion Hazzikostas just gave at Gamescom regarding patch 7.3. So let's just get into it. Now right off the bat, Ion said that he was most looking forward to the storyline in patch 7.3. He said that the patch is packed with story-rich quests and that fans of the Suramar experience are really going to like what Argus has to offer. He mentioned that in a lot of ways, it feels a lot like a level-up zone, in that the more you quest, the more storyline you unlock, and then the more areas of Argus you unlock. So it really feels like this whole story of what's going on is unfolding right before you, rather than just having a base area like the Timeless Isle that's just there and ready for you to explore. Now, I'm personally a fan of this because I love story-driven content. I loved what they did with Suramar. I think that the issues that they're going to have with Argus are the same that they're going to be having with Suramar in that sense. Some people loved the story-driven quests. They loved that there was really no huge reward of doing Suramar than just experiencing the story for yourself. I personally love those kinds of quests. I love how they're really pushing WoW to go back to story-driven quests and just really pushing as much story as they can on us. So I really think that in terms of the leveling, the not leveling up experience, but the questing experience in Argus, that it's going to be very, very exciting, particularly because this is a part of the World of Warcraft story that goes way back to World of Warcraft roots, in terms of we really get to learn who the Draenei are and how the Eridar became the Draenei, and we get to learn more about the triumvirate between Archimonde and Sargeras, or Archimonde, and Kil'jaeden and Velen. So overall, I'm really, really excited that Ion has been looking forward to mostly the story that 7.3 has to offer. Another topic that Ion touched on was regarding catch-up mechanics. Now, on Argus, there is going to be a new catch-up area. It's way bigger than the Timeless Isle, and even a bit bigger than Tanaan, and he said that it's certainly more diverse in terms of the activities that you can do there. He mentioned that there are going to be new bind-on-account tokens that will help your new characters catch up, as well as a new currency. Furthermore, he mentioned that artifact knowledge is now going to be a global value. So what this means is that when you log into your character, regardless of what their previous artifact knowledge is, they will have an artifact knowledge of 41. And this number is going to be going up every week, week after week, without you doing much work into doing it. So whether you have a character that just reached level 110, or you say have an alt who is 110 and only has an artifact knowledge of 17, regardless of what their progress is, once 7.3 hits, everyone's going to have 41 artifact knowledge. So that in itself is going to save a lot of time regarding the grindiest part of Legion so far, which has been accumulating artifact power. Lastly, he also mentioned that all 3 artifact slots will be unlocked, as well as the artifact traits, which previously, or currently rather, you have to unlock by doing the Broken Shore quest line. Now, once 7.3 hits, you won't need to do that quest line anymore. You're going to be able to get all the way to Concordance and level up Concordance without doing the quest line. So that is another lengthy task, which I'm sure a lot of people who, now that we're getting into the end of the expansion, they're going to be leveling up alts. I know that I certainly start leveling up alts when we get to the tail end of the expansion. I feel like Argus is, once we reach Argus and once I start getting into the raids, you know, I have my main, but once I'm raiding solidly with him, I'm probably going to want to start branching off into a couple of alts. So I'm really happy that they're adding more and more catch-up mechanics for not only those new players, but also players who would now like to roll a couple of alts during this patch. Another topic that Ion touched on with Panzer was legendaries. Right off the bat, he said that they definitely came out of the gates being way too stingy with the drop rates. He said that looking back, they wish that they wouldn't have made the drop rate so low. They definitely would have wanted to get them out there much quicker. And on top of that, he also regrets that some of the legendaries were blatantly more powerful than others. I remember when I got my first legendary early on, I was very, very upset because, well, yay, awesome, I got a legendary. At the time, it was one of the worst that you could get for warriors. So we were looking at how infrequently legendaries were dropping, and that coupled with, well, great, I spent all this time getting a legendary, it's going to be forever until I get my next one, and I'm stuck with one that's not even that great for the type of content that I want to do. They have been working on bridging the power gap between legendaries, which I certainly appreciate. So for the more average player, if they get a legendary, chances are they're going to be happy with it. They're going to feel like they're getting something of value. Now, of course, for the higher end players, particularly the mythic raiders, there still are going to be those legendaries that are best in slot for particular fights. That's just how math works. There's usually always going to be something that's better. So I feel like the power gap that they're trying to bridge is more so for the general average player base that, you know, isn't too concerned with getting the absolute best legendary possible so that they can maximize their DPS or their survivability on a boss. So for the most part, I'm pretty happy to see that they're going to be continuing to do that. And going along with that, something else he touched on is that there is going to be a vendor on Argus. It is the same Nether Shard vendor that you can find right now on the Broken Shore. However, instead of accepting Nether Shards, he's going to be accepting the new currency, which I mentioned earlier, which is called Veiled Argonite. And using Veiled Argonite, you're going to be able to purchase armor tokens, which turn into item level 910 armor. And those can be used to target legendaries, as you currently can with the tokens which you can purchase for Nether Shards on the Broken Shore. Furthermore, you're also going to be able to target a specific relic type. That was something else that was mentioned very frequently on the forums, on the Reddit. I saw a lot of people complaining that they really wanted to target specific relic types, because if you're, say, one spec and you have 2 of your 3 relics, but you're really looking for a good third one, it becomes frustrating if tokens are if armor tokens are the way that you're getting those relics, and you just keep getting the same 2 relics that you already have. It becomes really frustrating. So I'm very, very happy to see that they're really listening to the community on that, and they're providing the players with more options to really target the types of gear they want, whether it's the regular type of gear with a relic or the legendaries. Moving on, the Netherlight Crucible was another topic of discussion, and during this interview, Panzer mentioned that people are very wary of the RNG elements of the trees that you get at random. If you don't know how the Netherlight Crucible works, basically it is a way to upgrade your relics in your artifact weapon. And when you put in the relic, you get presented a tree that you can then choose to level up with. Now the big kicker with this is that no relics will have or almost no relics will have the same trees, and that in the sense that you could put in 2 of the same relics and you will get 2 random trees with different modifiers. And you know, quite obviously there's going to be some reservations with that, because there is going to be the good trees and there's going to be the bad trees, and you know, people don't want to be stuck by getting the random bad tree. And the way that Ian viewed this is that the trees are giving players choice within randomness. He used this metaphor, which went something along the lines of, instead of rolling the dice and being stuck with the outcome, regardless of what it is, you get to roll the dice a few times and then pick the outcome that you like best. So while the tree that you get might not be exactly what you wanted, you still have the choice to choose the path that you want to go down. So these trees do allow for more options of customization that normally would not be present in new gear. I still think that for those higher end raiders, like I mentioned before, same thing with the legendaries, they're going to be wanting to target specific trees. So I do think it's a strong possibility that for those higher end players, they're going to be farming relics and just putting relics into that crucible until they get the desired tree that they want. I think for the average player, it's going to be less of an issue. For those who are only really concerned with normal or LFR, I don't think the trees will matter that much. But certainly for those mythic raiders and the heroic raiders, I still think that there is a chance that these trees could not be well received, particularly if you just keep putting relic after relic in and you're not getting the good trees. He did mention that within the trees, those relics' power will be tied to the artifact power that you receive. So as with Concordance, you're not going to really be able to completely maximize a relic's tree before you get to a new item level of relic. So they don't really think that maxing out a tree is going to be an issue for anyone. As you level up, there's going to be new higher item levels of gear, particularly with the new raids and the new dungeons. So you're going to be swapping out new relics quite frequently. I don't know exactly what the extent is of the trees in terms of the Netherlight Crucible, because there is going to get a point where you get the highest level relic possible, and then you're just going to be pumping power into it. Same thing like Concordance. Of course, the cap to reach Concordance is absolutely ludicrous. I don't think anybody has reached the cap for Concordance yet. In fact, I think it was decided it was mathematically impossible to reach Concordance within the expansion. So the ultimate answer is that we're just going to have to wait and see exactly what sort of randomness we get from these relic trees, and ultimately how much of an impact these trees have on the gameplay. Of course, Ian wanted to touch on Antorus, which is the big raid that is going to be coming up in Argus. He said that it's going to be coming up later this year, so I'm assuming, right now it's August, so we're going to be looking at something maybe around September or October, maybe even November when the raid lands. They're not really announcing a date just yet, but hopefully it'll be within the next couple of months. Now, while he did say it is the final big raid of Legion, he did not say explicitly that it is the last raid of Legion. He said the final big raid, and the way that he said it, it made it seem like there could possibly be a smaller raid that comes after Antorus. He did say that there is more story to tell in Legion after Antorus, so that would definitely lead me to believe that they have something planned to come after Antorus, which I think would be really, really interesting, because Antorus is supposed to be this big, mega monolithic raid that takes place in these huge outdoor zones, and you're going to be fighting all of these absolutely legendary characters. What exactly could come after Antorus? And if it's not another big raid, what could they put in it? If it's a small raid with a couple of bosses, it's going to have to be quite something to be that final raid of Legion. So that in itself gets me even more excited, because we know pretty much what's coming for Antorus, but not really anything that's coming afterwards. So I'm really excited to see what the development team has to do in order to really bring that last raid as a proper closer for Legion. Panzer and Ian also talked about mounts very briefly during this interview, specifically the Lucid Nightmare mount, which was mined and has been highly coveted, even though it's not even out yet. Panzer was concerned if there was a specific way of getting it, or if it will be widely accessible. And Ian said that while he can't give any specific details, they do like to make things like the Lucid Nightmare accessible to everyone. So I know that I'm certainly going to be aiming to get the Lucid Nightmare however you get it. But the way he said it, he made it seem like it won't be some big impossible task to get this mount, which looks really, really cool. Another topic that they talked about regarding mounts is if Blizzard will be giving flying to ground mounts that came out during Legion before Legion flying came out? And Ian's answer to that was pretty much no. The development team is not interested in going back to mounts and giving them flying, particularly if they are specifically ground mounts. I could see a couple of mounts in Legion that don't have flying to get flying, but I think for the most part, if a mount doesn't have flying, then it really shouldn't have flying. Not every single mount absolutely has to have flying, even if one of those mounts is your favorite mount. Lastly, Ian wanted to touch on the overall 7.3 experience. Now, he mentioned that a half regret that he had was that in 7.2, they had all this awesome content, but a large part of that content was class-based. And if you only played one out of the 12 classes, you only got to experience a 12th of that content. So technically, while Blizzard did jam a bunch of content into 7.2, not everybody could experience it. With 7.3, Ian said that there's going to be a ton of core quest content that all the players can enjoy. Of course, we're going to be getting the new dungeon. There's going to be a lot of progression content through Argus itself, which I'm sure has to do with unlocking the new areas and the world quests, and making sure that everyone, regardless if they're a new player or if they're going to be playing an alt, or if they only have the one main that they play, like myself, they're going to be able to get as much content experience as possible in 7.3. A note on top of that, when he talked about the raiding experience, Panzer mentioned class stacking, and if Blizzard would be going back to certain fights like the Avatar of Sargeras, how a lot of guilds are stacking rogues on that fight and changing those fights in order to make them more composition friendly. And Ian said that Blizzard is not really interested in changing a fight in order to make a class not as good at that fight. So they're not going to go back to Avatar and make it so stacking rogues can't be a thing on that fight. They are always going to be striving to create fights where any good guild that has a good composition, a good balanced composition, can complete that fight. And they're certainly aiming to do that in patch 7.3 for Antorus. So that's really, really great to hear from them. Like I said before, in terms of the legendaries and the skill trees, math can't really be beaten. If there is a mathematically absolute best way to do even one fight, the guilds that are aiming for world first or for server first, they're going to be taking every advantage that they can in those fights. And if that means needing to stack 5 or 6 boomkins, or needing to stack, for whatever reason, 5 or 6 hunters in their 20-man group, they're absolutely going to be doing that. And these are just things that are so, in my opinion, hard to balance around, that it's inevitable that it happens on at least 1 or 2 fights. There's going to be that absolute ideal composition, mathematically speaking, and there's really not much that we can do about it other than grinning and bearing it if we're in that higher level of raider, or not really caring if we're just raiding LFR or regular or heroic. Stacking is really only an issue on Mythic at this point, so I think it's good that Blizzard is constantly reminding us that they're doing the best that they can to balance these fights. But as players, I also think it's good that we remind ourselves that there's only so much that they can do, and there will be a best composition for a fight, and mathematically there's just no way around that. And that pretty much wraps it up for the interview. I think Ian brought up a lot of good points regarding 7.3, and Panzer brought up a lot of concerns that I think the community had in general, and Ian did a really great job at addressing those. So no big major announcements were made during this interview, but I think it's good. I think as we get closer and closer to 7.3, people start to worry about some of the things that have started to show up in patch 7.2, and it's always great to have someone from the Blizzard team to talk to someone from the community and address the concerns and put those concerns to rest, because it just makes coming into 7.3 all that much more enjoyable. There's no apprehension about whether or not people are going to like it. Personally, I'm ecstatic about 7.3. I mean, Legion in general has been one of my favorite expansions in WoW, and I strongly believe with what they've been saying regarding 7.3 and what I've been playing on the public test realm, I think 7.3 is going to be one of the best patches easily. I'm so excited to play it. I think regardless of what kind of player you are, whether you're a PvPer or if you're just into questing or world quests, or if you're a hardcore raider, or if you just really want to absorb as much story and content as you possibly can, regardless of what type of content it is, you're going to love patch 7.3. So that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, then of course give it a thumbs up. If you have anything to say, if you have any questions that you thought should have been answered during the interview, or if there's any lingering concerns that you have, then of course leave them in the comment section down below. And if you like my channel, you like the types of videos I put out, then of course feel free to subscribe. I hope to see you guys in the next video. See you later.